Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Lila Martinez never imagined that her life would change completely in a 5-star hotel ladies' room. She was trying to clean the champagne dripping from her brown hair when she heard the conversation that would leave her speechless. "Are you sure he's going to propose to you today?" A familiar voice whispered. Lila froze inside the stall, immediately recognizing the venomous tone of Sophia Langley, the same woman who had accidentally spilled champagne on her 5 minutes earlier. "Of course, darling. Ethan Carter is desperate to win me back after our breakup." Sophia laughed maliciously. Men like him can't go very long without a sophisticated woman by their side. "But what if he doesn't propose?" another voice asked. "Then I'll humiliate that nobody he brought to provoke me. Did you see her cheap dress? It probably cost less than my makeup." Lila felt her blood boil. Nobody. She wasn't nobody. She was a talented graphic designer who had built her own company from scratch. "Ethan Carter always comes back to me," Sophia continued. "He's just trying to make me jealous by bringing that maid dressed up." The cruel laughter echoed through the marble bathroom, and Lila felt hot tears streaming down her face. She wasn't anyone's date. She had bought her ticket to this charity gala with her own savings, dreaming of getting new clients for her company. When she finally emerged from the stall, the bathroom was empty. Lila looked at her reflection in the ornate mirror. Wet hair, smudged makeup, stained dress. Sophia was right about one thing. She definitely didn't look like she belonged in that world, but something inside her rebelled against that idea. Lila straightened her shoulders, cleaned her face, and left the bathroom with her head held high. She wasn't going to let Sophia Langley ruin her night. The hotel corridor was almost empty. With just a few late guests walking toward the main ballroom, Lila was almost at the elevator when a deep male voice made her stop. "You." Lila turned, and her heart almost stopped. The most handsome man she had ever seen in her life was standing a few meters away, tall, dark, with penetrating blue eyes, and a tuxedo that probably cost more than her apartment rent for a year. "Me?" she asked, confused. He approached with determined steps, and Lila had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You're perfect," he said, as if he were analyzing a work of art. "Excuse me?" Lila blinked several times, thinking she had misunderstood. "You serve perfectly for what I need." He studied her face with an intensity that made her blush. "What's your name?" "Lila Martinez," she answered automatically, still trying to process what was happening. "Lila," he repeated, and something in the way he said her name made butterflies appear in her stomach. "I'm Ethan Carter." The floor seemed to disappear under Lila's feet. Ethan Carter, the billionaire Ethan Carter, CEO of Carter Industries, one of the most powerful men in New York, and apparently Sophia's ex-boyfriend. "You are," she stammered. "I need a favor," Ethan interrupted, his eyes never leaving her face. "And in return, I'm going to give you something you really want." Lila frowned. "You don't even know me. How can you know what I want?" A small, mysterious smile played on his lips. "Because I saw what Sophia Langley did to you, and I know exactly how you can get revenge on her." Lila's heart accelerated. "Revenge?" "Imagine her face when she discovers that you're not just a nobody," Ethan said, taking a step closer. "Imagine her expression when you're introduced as—" He stopped, leaving the sentence hanging in the air, and Lila felt like she was on the edge of a precipice. "As what?" she whispered. Ethan smiled, a smile that was both dangerous and irresistible. "As my fiancé." Lila stared at Ethan Carter, like he had just spoken in a foreign language. "Your fiancé?" She stammered, taking a step back. "Are you completely insane?" Ethan's mysterious smile didn't waver. "Probably, but I'm also completely serious." "You don't even know me," Lila protested, her voice rising an octave. "You can't just walk up to a stranger and ask them to be your fake fiancé." "Why not?" Ethan tilted his head, studying her reaction. "You need revenge against Sophia. I need to prove a point to my family. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." Lila laughed, a short, hysterical sound. "Mutually beneficial? This is crazy." "This is your chance to show Sophia Langley that she picked the wrong person to mess with," Ethan interrupted smoothly. "Unless, of course, you prefer to go home with champagne in your hair and let her win." The words hit Lila like a slap. She could still hear Sophia's cruel laughter echoing in her mind, still feel the humiliation burning in her chest. "What exactly are you proposing?" she heard herself ask. Ethan's eyes lit up with satisfaction. 6 months, fake engagement, a few public appearances, and then an amicable breakup. In exchange, you get $50,000, a complete wardrobe makeover, and the satisfaction of watching Sophia's face when she realizes she underestimated you. Lila's breath caught. $1 million. Upon signing the contract, Ethan confirmed, plus all expenses covered during our arrangement. Lila's mind raced. $50,000 would save her business, pay off her debts, and give her the financial security she'd been dreaming of. But pretending to be engaged to a billionaire, that was beyond anything she'd ever imagined. "There's a catch, isn't there?" she asked suspiciously. "There's always a catch," Ethan chuckled, a rich sound that made her stomach flutter. "Smart girl. Yes, there's a catch. My family is traditional. They expect their heir to be married by 30, and my birthday is in 6 months. If I don't produce a suitable fiancé, they'll force me into an arranged marriage with someone of their choosing. And Sophia? Sophia thinks she can manipulate me into taking her back by making me jealous." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's been spreading rumors that I'm desperate to win her back. Tonight, she's expecting me to propose to her publicly." Lila felt a thrill of vindictive pleasure. "And instead, you want to announce your engagement to the nobody she humiliated." "Exactly." Ethan pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "My lawyer is sending the contract to your email as we speak. What's your address?" Lila rattled off her email automatically, still trying to process everything. "This is insane. You're insane. I'm insane for even considering this, but you are considering it," Ethan observed, stepping closer. "Because you're tired of people like Sophia thinking they can walk all over you. Because you're stronger than you know, and you're ready to prove it." Lila's phone buzzed. She looked down to see an email from Carter Industries' legal department with the subject line, "Confidential Engagement Agreement." "I can't believe I'm doing this," she muttered, opening the email. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. 6 months of fake engagement, public appearances as needed, maintain the illusion for family and media, terminate by mutual agreement, and there, in black and white, was the payment. $50,000 upon signing, plus a $10,000 monthly allowance for expenses, $60,000 total. Lila's voice was barely a whisper. "Plus bonuses for certain milestones," Ethan added, "family dinners, charity events, that sort of thing. Think of it as a very well-paid acting job." Lila scrolled through the contract, her hands shaking slightly. It was professional, detailed, and completely legitimate. There were clauses about confidentiality, public behavior, and even living arrangements if necessary. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "Unfortunately, you don't have that luxury." Ethan checked his watch. "Sophia is expecting a proposal in exactly 10 minutes. If you want your revenge, it has to be now." Lila looked up at him, this impossibly handsome stranger who was offering her a chance to change her life. "Why me?" "You could have any woman in that ballroom. Because you're real," Ethan said simply. "Sophia is all polish and pretense. You're authentic, and honestly, you're the only person who looked at me tonight and didn't see dollar signs." Lila laughed despite herself. "I didn't know who you were." "Exactly." Ethan smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "So, Lila Martinez, will you help me disappoint my ex-girlfriend and shock my family?" Lila looked at the contract one more time, then at Ethan's expectant face. She thought about Sophia's cruel words, about her struggling business, about the chance to finally feel powerful instead of powerless. "I need a pen," she said. Ethan immediately produced an elegant silver pen from his jacket. "Here." Lila signed her name with a flourish, her heart pounding. "There, it's done." "Excellent." Ethan pocketed the contract and offered her his arm. "Now, my dear fiancée, shall we go ruin Sophia's evening?" As they walked toward the ballroom, Lila felt like she was floating. The champagne-stained dress that had made her feel so small an hour ago now felt like a costume, the before picture in her transformation story. "Ethan," she said as they approached the grand doors. "Yes? What happens after tonight? I mean, how do we do this?" Ethan paused, his hand on the door handle. "We figure it out as we go. But Lila, get ready for your life to change completely." He pushed open the doors, and Lila was immediately hit by the sound of classical music, tinkling champagne glasses, and the low murmur of New York's elite. Every head in the room seemed to turn toward them. And there, in the center of the ballroom, stood Sophia Langley in a stunning red gown, her face lighting up when she saw Ethan. "Showtime," Ethan whispered, and Lila felt his hand tighten protectively around hers. Sophia began walking toward them, her smile predatory and confident. She had no idea that her perfect evening was about to become a nightmare. Lila squeezed Ethan's hand and smiled. Let the games begin. The ballroom fell silent as Ethan Carter stepped onto the small stage at the far end of the room, Lila's hand firmly clasped in his. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathering of Manhattan's most powerful elite, but Lila felt like she was standing under a spotlight. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan's voice carried effortlessly across the room, commanding attention without effort. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this wonderful charity event. As you know, the Carter Foundation has always been committed to supporting education for underprivileged children. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched Sophia Langley push through the crowd, her red dress flowing like liquid fire. Sophia's perfectly manicured fingers clutched a champagne flute so tightly, Lila was surprised it didn't shatter. However, Ethan continued, his thumb stroking gently across Lila's knuckles. Tonight, I have a personal announcement that makes this evening even more special. The crowd leaned forward collectively. Sensing drama, Lila spotted several society photographers discreetly raising their cameras, and her stomach did a flip. This was really happening. There was no going back now. 6 months ago, I thought I knew what I wanted in life. Ethan's voice took on a more intimate tone, though it still carried to every corner of the room. I thought success was measured purely in business achievements and social status. But then I met someone who changed everything. Lila felt her cheeks burn as hundreds of eyes focused on her. She was acutely aware of her champagne-stained dress, her slightly smudged makeup, and the fact that she definitely didn't belong among these people who probably spent more on their shoes than she made in a month. Sophia had reached the front of the crowd now, her face a mask of confident expectation. She was beautiful, Lila had to admit, tall, elegant, with the kind of polished sophistication that came from a lifetime of privilege. Her blonde hair was swept into a perfect chignon, and her red gown probably cost more than Lila's car. This woman, Ethan continued, lifting their joined hands, taught me that real beauty comes from strength, authenticity, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. Lila caught Sophia's eye and saw the exact moment when confusion began to creep into her expression. Sophia's perfect smile faltered slightly as she looked between Ethan and Lila, trying to figure out what was happening. Lila Martinez, Ethan turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense and focused. Has been my secret for too long. I've been selfish, wanting to keep her all to myself. But tonight, I can't wait any longer. The crowd gasped collectively as Ethan dropped to one knee, still holding Lila's hand. Lila's eyes widened in shock. This wasn't part of the plan. They had only discussed a simple announcement, not a full proposal performance. Lila. Ethan's voice was soft but carried in the sudden silence. You've turned my world upside down in the most beautiful way possible. You've shown me what it means to love someone for who they truly are, not for what they can do for me. Lila stared down at him, her mind reeling. The sincerity in his voice was so convincing that for a moment she almost believed he meant every word. Then she remembered this was all an act, a performance to humiliate Sophia and satisfy his family's expectations. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lila's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the light from the chandeliers and threw rainbows across the room. The center stone was easily 3 carats, surrounded by smaller diamonds that sparkled like stars. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Ethan asked, his voice carrying just the right amount of vulnerability to make the proposal seem heartfelt and genuine. Lila was vaguely aware of the crowd holding its collective breath, of phone cameras recording every moment, of Sophia's face turning an interesting shade of pale, but mostly she was focused on Ethan's eyes, which seemed to be silently asking her to trust him. Yes, she whispered, then cleared her throat and said it louder. Yes, I will marry you. The ballroom erupted in applause and cheers as Ethan slipped the ring onto Lila's finger. It was a perfect fit, which surprised her until she realized he must have guessed her size from watching her hands earlier. The man was clearly detail-oriented. Ethan stood and pulled Lila into his arms, spinning her around once before setting her down and capturing her lips in a kiss that made her knees weak. For a moment, Lila forgot they were performing for an audience. The kiss was soft, sweet, and surprisingly tender for something that was supposed to be fake. When they broke apart, Lila was breathless and slightly dazed. Ethan's eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, and she saw something there that made her heart skip, something that looked dangerously like real emotion. "I love you," he whispered, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear, and Lila felt her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "I love you too," she whispered back, surprising herself with how easily the words came. The crowd surged forward to congratulate them, and Lila found herself swept into a whirlwind of handshakes, air kisses, and enthusiastic well-wishes from people she'd never met. Everyone wanted to know how they'd met, when they'd started dating, and why they'd kept it secret for so long. Ethan handled the questions with smooth professionalism, spinning a tale about meeting Lila at a coffee shop, being impressed by her intelligence and independence, and wanting to keep their relationship private until they were sure it was serious. "She's not like the other women I've dated," Ethan said to a reporter who had materialized from somewhere. "Lila doesn't care about my money or my status. She fell in love with me before she even knew who I was." Lila nodded along, playing her part, but she was hyper-aware of Sophia's absence from the congratulatory crowd. She spotted the blonde woman standing near the bar, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Excuse me," Lila said to the group of society wives who were peppering her with questions about wedding plans. "I need to powder my nose." She made her way through the crowd toward the ladies' room, but Sophia intercepted her before she could reach the door. "Well, well." Sophia's voice was like ice wrapped in silk. "Congratulations on your acquisition." Lila straightened her shoulders, drawing on every ounce of confidence she possessed. "Thank you. It's been quite a night." Sophia's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Oh, you poor naive little girl. You actually think this is real, don't you?" "I think," Lila said carefully, "that Ethan and I are very happy together." "Ethan Carter doesn't do happy." Sophia stepped closer, her perfume cloying and overwhelming. "He does strategic. He does calculated. He does whatever benefits him most in the moment." Lila felt a flicker of doubt, but she pushed it aside. "Maybe that's how he was with you. But people change." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "You really believe that, don't you? You think you're special. You think you're different from all the other women he's used and discarded." "I know I'm different from you," Lila shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. "I would never treat someone the way you treated me tonight." "The way I treated you?" Sophia's voice rose slightly. "Honey, that was just the beginning. You have no idea what you've walked into. Ethan Carter will chew you up and spit you out the moment you're no longer useful to him." "Is that what happened to you?" Lila asked sweetly. "Did he get tired of your usefulness?" Sophia's face flushed red. "I broke up with him. I realized I was too good for him. Too good for his games and his manipulation." "Of course you did." Lila nodded sympathetically. "It must be hard watching him move on so quickly with someone he clearly loves more than he ever loved you." Sophia's carefully composed mask finally cracked. "You're nothing," she hissed. "You're nobody. You're a pathetic little girl playing dress-up in a world you don't belong in. Maybe." Lila shrugged, holding up her left hand so the enormous diamond caught the light. "But I'm a nobody who's engaged to the man you couldn't keep." Sophia's mouth fell open in shock at Lila's boldness. Lila had never spoken to anyone like that in her life, but something about wearing Ethan's ring and playing this role was bringing out a confidence she didn't know she possessed. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Sophia finally managed, "Because it won't. Men like Ethan don't marry women like you. They marry women like me. And yet," Lila smiled sweetly, "here I am with his ring on my finger, and here you are, alone at the bar." Sophia's face went through several shades of red before she turned on her heel and stalked away, her designer heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. Lila watched her go, feeling a surge of triumph mixed with disbelief. She had actually done it. She had stood up to Sophia Langley and won. That was impressive. Lila turned to find Ethan standing behind her, his expression unreadable. "You heard all that?" she asked, suddenly feeling embarrassed. "Enough." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "You handled yourself beautifully. I'm proud of you." Lila felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "Just playing my part." "Were you?" Ethan's eyes searched her face, because for a moment there, it seemed like you were defending something real. Before Lila could respond, an older woman with silver hair and sharp blue eyes approached them. She was elegant in the way that only came from generations of breeding and money, and Lila instinctively knew this had to be someone important. "Ethan," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent Lila couldn't place. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your fiancée?" Ethan's entire demeanor shifted, becoming more formal. "Of course, grandmother. I'd like you to meet Lila Martinez." "Lila, this is my grandmother, Margaret Carter. Lila's heart nearly stopped. She was looking at the matriarch of the Carter family, one of the most powerful women in New York society. Mrs. Carter, Lila managed, offering her hand. It's an honor to meet you. Margaret studied Lila with the intensity of a hawk examining potential prey. Ms. Martinez. How unexpected. The word hung in the air like a challenge, and Lila felt Ethan tense beside her. Grandmother. Ethan's voice held a warning note. I'm simply surprised, darling, Margaret continued, her smile sharp as a blade. It's not like you to keep secrets from the family. We had no idea you were even dating anyone seriously. Lila felt like she was walking through a minefield. Every word could potentially explode their carefully constructed story. We wanted to keep things private, Lila said carefully, until we were sure about our future together. And now you're sure? Margaret's eyes never left Lila's face. Completely, Ethan said firmly, wrapping his arm around Lila's waist. Lila is everything I've been looking for. Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. How lovely. And what is it you do, dear? For work, I mean. I'm a graphic designer, Lila said, lifting her chin. I own my own company. How entrepreneurial. Margaret's tone suggested this was not necessarily a compliment. And your family? Are they in business as well? Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. This was exactly the kind of interrogation she'd been dreading. My parents own a small restaurant in Queens. Queens, Margaret repeated, as if the borough left a bad taste in her mouth. How quaint. Grandmother. Ethan's voice was sharp now. Lila's background is perfectly fine. Lila interrupted. Surprising both of them. I'm proud of my family, and where I come from. My parents worked hard to give me opportunities, and I've worked hard to build my own success. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. Indeed. And how did you and Ethan meet? Lila's mind raced. What had Ethan told the reporter earlier? A coffee shop? We met at a coffee shop, she said, hoping her voice sounded natural. I was working on a project, and Ethan was also there. Also there, Margaret repeated dryly. How romantic. It was, Ethan said, his arm tightening around Lila. Lila was completely focused on her work, didn't even notice who I was. It was refreshing. I'm sure it was. Margaret's smile was razor sharp. Well, this has been illuminating. I do hope we'll have a chance to chat more soon, Lila. Dear, perhaps you could join us for Sunday dinner this week. Lila felt Ethan's body go rigid beside her, and she knew instinctively that this was some kind of test. I'd love to, she said, meeting Margaret's gaze steadily. Thank you for inviting me. Wonderful. Margaret's smile widened, and Lila had the distinct feeling she'd just walked into a trap. I'll have my assistant send you the details. With that, Margaret glided away, leaving Lila and Ethan alone in the suddenly too quiet corner of the ballroom. Sunday dinner, Lila said faintly. That sounds terrifying. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. My grandmother is formidable, but you handled her perfectly. Did I? Lila looked down at the enormous ring on her finger. Because I feel like I just agreed to walk into a lion's den. You did, Ethan said honestly, but you won't be alone. I'll be there with you. Lila looked up at him, this man who was still essentially a stranger, and felt a flutter of something that might have been trust. What have I gotten myself into? She whispered. Ethan's expression softened. Something that might turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to both of us. Before Lila could ask what he meant by that, a waiter approached with a tray of champagne glasses. To celebrate your engagement, the waiter said, with a smile. Ethan took 2 glasses and handed one to Lila. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. To new beginnings, Lila echoed, clinking her glass against his. As she took a sip of the expensive champagne, Lila caught sight of Sophia near the exit, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. Mission accomplished, she thought with satisfaction. But as she looked around the ballroom at all the curious faces, at Margaret Carter's calculating expression, at Ethan's unreadable blue eyes, Lila realized that the real challenge was just beginning. She had 6 months to convince New York's elite that she belonged in their world, 6 months to play the perfect fiancé to a man she barely knew, and 6 months to figure out why her fake engagement was starting to feel dangerously real. The champagne suddenly tasted like possibilities and terror in equal measure. Lila stood in front of her tiny apartment mirror on Sunday afternoon, trying on her 5th outfit and fighting the urge to call Ethan and fake a sudden illness. The Carter family estate was located in the Hamptons, and she was supposed to be there in 2 hours for what Margaret Carter had ominously called a proper family dinner. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. On my way to pick you up. Don't overthink the outfit. You look beautiful in anything. Leela snorted. Easy for him to say. He'd grown up in this world. She, on the other hand, was about to have dinner with people who probably spent more on wine than she made in 6 months. She settled on a navy blue dress that was elegant but not too formal, paired with the pearl earrings her grandmother had left her. The engagement ring caught the light every time she moved her hand, and she still couldn't quite believe it was real. Well, the ring was real. The engagement, that was another story. 20 minutes later, Lila heard the sound of an expensive car engine outside her building. She grabbed her purse and headed downstairs, where a sleek black Tesla was waiting at the curb. Ethan got out to open her door, looking devastating in dark jeans and a white button-down shirt that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive. "You look perfect," he said, his eyes appreciating her outfit. "Ready for this?" "Not even close," Lila admitted, sliding into the passenger seat. The car's interior was all black leather and gleaming technology. "Tell me again why your grandmother invited me to this dinner." Ethan pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. "Because she wants to intimidate you into breaking up with me." "Great. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear," Lila said dryly. "Any other encouraging insights you'd like to share?" Ethan glanced at her, his expression serious. "My family has very specific ideas about who I should marry. They've been pushing me towards suitable candidates since I turned 25. "Suitable candidates," Lila repeated. "Let me guess. Wealthy, well-connected. Probably named something like Muffy or Bitsy." That earned her a laugh. "You're not wrong. There's been a parade of debutantes, heiresses, and daughters of family friends, all perfectly nice, all completely boring." Lila felt a strange pang at his words. "So, what happens when they realize I'm not suitable?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. "They're going to try to buy you off." "What?" Lila turned to stare at him. "It's their standard move," Ethan said matter-of-factly. "When someone they disapprove of gets too close to the family, they offer money to make the problem go away." Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. "And you think I'd take it?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "But they don't know you like I do." The confidence in his voice made Lila's heart skip a beat. It was ridiculous. They'd known each other for less than a week, and their entire relationship was a carefully constructed lie. But something about the way he said it made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he really did see something special in her. The drive to the Hamptons took just over an hour, and Lila spent most of it trying to memorize the backstory Ethan had prepared for them. They'd met 6 months ago at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. He'd been there for a business meeting that fell through. She'd been working on a logo design for a local nonprofit. They'd started talking about art and design, discovered a shared love of old movies and terrible reality TV, and had been inseparable ever since. "The key," Ethan explained as they turned onto a tree-lined private road, "is to keep it simple. Don't volunteer information they don't ask for, but don't lie about anything that can be easily verified." "Got it," Lila said, though her stomach was churning with nerves. "Anything else I should know about your family?" Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "My Uncle Edward will probably make some inappropriate comments about your background. My cousin Oliver is harmless but asks a lot of questions, and my Aunt Catherine will quiz you about wedding plans." "Wedding plans?" Lila's voice squeaked. "We just got engaged." "In their world, engagements are followed immediately by wedding planning," Ethan explained. "The Carter family doesn't do anything small or simple." Lila was about to respond when the house came into view, and her words died in her throat. Calling it a house was like calling the Sistine Chapel a church. The Carter estate was a massive Georgian mansion that looked like it belonged in a Jane Austen novel, complete with white columns, perfectly manicured gardens, and enough windows to house a small village. Holy Lila caught herself before she could finish the curse. "That's where you grew up?" "One of the places," Ethan said casually, as if having multiple mansion homes was perfectly normal. "We also have houses in Martha's Vineyard, Aspen, and a penthouse in Manhattan." Lila felt a wave of panic. This was insane. She was a girl from Queens who lived in a studio apartment and considered dinner at Olive Garden a splurge. What was she doing pretending to belong in this world? Ethan must have sensed her distress because he reached over and took her hand. "Hey, look at me." Lila turned to meet his eyes, which were warm and reassuring. "You belong here because I want you here," he said simply, "and what I want matters to this family, whether they like it or not." Lila nodded, trying to draw strength from his confidence. "Okay, I can do this." "You can do this," Ethan agreed. "Just be yourself. That's all I'm asking." They pulled up to a circular driveway where several other expensive cars were already parked. Ethan came around to open Lila's door, and she took his offered arm, grateful for the support. The front door opened before they could ring the bell, revealing a uniformed butler who looked like he'd stepped out of a period drama. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ethan," the butler said with a slight British accent. "Mrs. Carter is expecting you in the blue drawing room." "Thank you, Winston," Ethan replied, leading Lila through an entrance hall that was bigger than her entire apartment. The walls were lined with oil paintings that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime, and a crystal chandelier that belonged in a museum hung overhead. Lila tried not to gawk as they walked through hallways decorated with priceless antiques and fresh flower arrangements that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Everything was perfect, pristine, and intimidating as heck. The blue drawing room turned out to be a formal sitting room where 4 people were already gathered. Drinks in hand, Lila recognized Margaret Carter immediately. She was seated in a high-backed chair like a queen holding court, wearing a string of pearls that probably cost more than Lila's car. "Ethan, darling." Margaret rose gracefully to greet them. "And Lila, how lovely to see you again." Her tone was polite but cool, and Lila felt immediately that she was being evaluated and found wanting a grandmother. Ethan leaned down to kiss Margaret's cheek. "Thank you for inviting us." "Of course." Margaret's smile was sharp. "Family is so important, don't you think?" Before Lila could respond, a man in his 50s with Ethan's blue eyes and a receding hairline approached them. "You must be the famous Lila," he said, his gaze traveling up and down her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "I'm Edward Carter, Ethan's uncle." "Nice to meet you," Lila managed, accepting his handshake and trying not to recoil at the way he held her hand just a little too long. "Yes, well," Edward's smile was oily. "Ethan certainly has interesting taste." Lila felt Ethan tense beside her. But before he could respond, a woman in her 40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and enough jewelry to stock a small store, descended upon them. "Lila," the woman exclaimed, air-kissing both of Lila's cheeks. "I'm Catherine, Ethan's aunt. We are just dying to hear everything about the engagement." "It's nice to meet you," Lila said, trying to keep track of all the names and relationships. "And I'm Oliver." A younger man who looked like a preppy version of Ethan stepped forward with a genuine smile. "The cousin. Ignore Uncle Edward. He's been drinking since noon." "Oliver." Margaret's voice held a warning note. "What?" "It's true," Oliver grinned, completely unrepentant. "So, Lila, tell us everything. How did our workaholic cousin finally get hooked?" Lila launched into their prepared story about meeting at the coffee shop and was relieved when it seemed to go over well. Oliver asked follow-up questions about her work. Catherine wanted to know about their first date, and even Margaret seemed to be listening with genuine interest. Uncle Edward, however, kept making little comments that felt like tiny cuts. "A graphic designer. How creative," he said when Lila mentioned her business. "And you said your parents own a restaurant in Queens?" "Yes." Lila lifted her chin. "Martinez Family Kitchen. They specialize in authentic Mexican cuisine." "How exotic." Edward's tone made it clear he didn't mean it as a compliment. Ethan's hand found Lila's lower back, a gesture of support that helped steady her nerves. "Lila's work is incredible," Ethan said firmly. "She just landed a major contract with the Thompson Group." Lila blinked in surprise. That wasn't part of their story, and she'd never heard of the Thompson Group, but Catherine looked impressed. "The Thompson Group? Oh my, that's wonderful. They're very selective about who they work with." Lila smiled and nodded, making a mental note to ask Ethan about that later. "Shall we move to the dining room?" Margaret suggested. And Lila realized this had just been the warm-up. The real interrogation was about to begin. The dining room was even more intimidating than the drawing room. A massive mahogany table that could easily seat 20 was set with what looked like antique china, crystal glasses, and enough silverware to confuse an etiquette expert. Lila was grateful she'd watched a few YouTube videos about formal dining. Ethan pulled out her chair, a gesture that earned an approving nod from Margaret, and Lila found herself seated between him and Oliver, with Margaret directly across from her. It felt very much like being positioned for maximum scrutiny. The first course was some kind of soup that Lila didn't recognize, but she pretended to enjoy. The conversation remained relatively light. Discussion of the charity gala, updates on various family friends, commentary on recent social events, but Lila could feel the tension building, like the calm before a storm. It was during the main course, some kind of fish that probably cost more per pound than Lila's weekly grocery budget, that Margaret finally struck. "So, Lila," Margaret said, her voice deceptively casual, "tell us about your family's background." Lila felt every eye at the table focus on her. "Well, My parents immigrated from Mexico when they were young. They worked very hard to build their restaurant and give me and my brother opportunities. How admirable. Margaret's smile was razor sharp. And they must be so proud of your association with Ethan. The way she said association made it clear what she really thought of Lila's place in Ethan's life. They're happy that I'm happy, Lila said carefully. Of course, Margaret nodded. I imagine this must all be quite overwhelming for someone from your circumstances. Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could respond, Ethan's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Grandmother, I think Lila's background is one of the things I love most about her. She understands the value of hard work and earning what you have. Oh, I'm sure she does, Edward chimed in with a nasty smile. The question is, what exactly has she earned? The implication was clear. And Lila felt her temper flare. She was about to respond when Margaret held up a hand. Now, Edward, let's not be crude, Margaret said, though her eyes glittered with malicious amusement. I'm sure Lila is a lovely girl. But Ethan, darling, you must understand our concerns. Marriage is such a serious commitment, especially for someone in your position. My position? Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. The Carter family has certain obligations, Margaret continued smoothly, to maintain our reputation, our standing in society. Surely, you can see how a marriage to someone so different might affect that. Lila felt like she'd been slapped. The message was crystal clear. She wasn't good enough for their family, and they weren't going to pretend otherwise. I think, Lila said quietly, her voice steady despite the fury building inside her, that a family's reputation should be based on how they treat people, not on how much money they have or where they come from. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Edward looked shocked, and Catherine seemed to be holding her breath. How refreshing, Margaret said finally, her tone suggesting it was anything but. I think Lila's right, Oliver said suddenly, breaking the tension. Some of the best people I know come from humble backgrounds. Character matters more than pedigree. Oliver, Margaret's voice held a clear warning. What? I'm just saying that maybe it's time we stop judging people based on their zip code, Oliver continued. Either brave or foolish enough to defy his grandmother. That's easy for you to say, Uncle Edward sneered. You're not the one who will inherit the family business. Actually, Ethan said quietly, and something in his tone made everyone at the table freeze. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. Lila looked at him in confusion. This definitely wasn't part of their plan. What do you mean? Margaret asked, her voice carefully controlled. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. I've been doing some thinking about my future, about what I really want, and I've made some decisions. He placed the envelope on the table in front of Margaret, and Lila noticed his hand was completely steady. These are transfer documents, Ethan said calmly. I'm signing over my shares in Carter Industries to Oliver. Effective immediately. The room erupted. Catherine gasped. Edward started swearing, and Margaret went very, very still. Ethan, Margaret's voice was like ice. You cannot be serious. I'm completely serious, Ethan replied. I'm tired of having my personal life dictated by business interests. If the family can't accept the woman I love, then maybe I don't belong in the family business. Lila stared at him in shock. This was way beyond anything they'd discussed. He was essentially disowning himself from a billion-dollar empire, and for what? A fake engagement. You're giving up everything, Edward sputtered. For her? I'm not giving up everything, Ethan said firmly. I'm choosing what matters most to me. Lila felt tears prick at her eyes. Even though she knew this was all part of an elaborate performance, the gesture was incredibly moving. Ethan, she whispered, you don't have to do this. He turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. Yes, I do. Some things are more important than money. Margaret slowly opened the envelope and scanned the documents inside. When she looked up, her face was pale but composed. I see you've thought this through, she said quietly. I have, Ethan confirmed. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, her sharp eyes moving between Ethan and Lila. Finally, she set the papers aside and picked up her wine glass. Well then, she said, her tone suddenly lighter. I suppose we should toast the happy couple. Lila blinked in confusion. That was it? Margaret was just giving up? I'm sorry? Ethan looked as confused as Lila felt. Margaret's smile was genuine for the first time that evening. Oh, my dear boy. Did you really think I didn't know? Know what? Lila asked. Though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer, that this entire engagement is a performance. Margaret said calmly, taking a sip of her wine. Really, Ethan, I've known you since you were in diapers. Do you think I can't tell when you're acting? Lila felt the blood drain from her face. They'd been caught. Game over. However, Margaret continued, seemingly oblivious to Lila's panic, what I didn't expect was this little display just now. Signing over your inheritance for a woman you barely know, that's either the most romantic gesture I've ever witnessed, or you're both better actors than I gave you credit for. Ethan was very still beside her, and Lila couldn't read his expression. The question is, Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp as lasers. Are you faking the engagement? Or are you faking that it's fake? Lila's mind reeled. What did that even mean? Because from where I'm sitting, Margaret continued, it looks like my grandson is head over heels in love with you, Miss Martinez. The question is whether he's admitted it to himself yet. Lila turned to look at Ethan, her heart pounding. His face was unreadable, but she could see a muscle ticking in his jaw. Grandmother, Ethan said carefully, I think you're overanalyzing the situation. Am I? Margaret's smile was knowing. Then you won't mind if I make a little wager. What kind of wager? Lila asked. Though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Give me 1 month, Margaret said. 1 month of real dates, real conversations, real getting to know each other. No contracts, no fake performances. Just 2 people spending time together. If at the end of that month you can honestly tell me you feel nothing for each other, I'll personally write you a check for whatever amount Ethan was paying you, and you can both walk away with no hard feelings. Lila's mouth fell open. You want us to actually date? I want you to be honest with yourselves, Margaret corrected, about what you're really feeling. Lila looked at Ethan, who was staring at his grandmother, with an expression she couldn't decipher. And if we refuse? Ethan asked. Margaret shrugged elegantly. Then I'll know I was right about the feelings being real. And you're both just too stubborn to admit it. Lila felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. Everything about this situation had spiraled completely out of control. This is crazy, she whispered. The best love stories usually are, Margaret said with a knowing smile. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes focused on his hands. When he finally looked up, he was looking at Lila, not his grandmother. What do you think? He asked softly. Lila stared into his blue eyes, searching for some clue about what he was thinking, what he was feeling. The smart thing would be to say no, to take whatever money was on the table and run. This was getting too complicated, too real, too dangerous for her heart. But as she looked at this man who had just offered to give up $1 billion inheritance for her, even if it was just part of an act, she realized she was already in way deeper than she'd intended. 1 month? She heard herself ask. 1 month. Margaret confirmed. Lila took a deep breath, knowing she was about to make either the best or worst decision of her life. Okay, she said quietly. 1 month. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, and she saw something flash across his face that looked suspiciously like relief. Excellent. Margaret clapped her hands together like a delighted child. This is going to be so much fun to watch. As the family moved on to dessert and the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that she had just agreed to something that was going to change her life forever. The question was she ready for that kind of change? Looking at Ethan, who was smiling at something Oliver was saying but kept glancing at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, Lila realized she was about to find out. One way or another, the next month was going to be very interesting. Lila stood in front of her tiny apartment bathroom mirror Tuesday morning, trying to apply mascara with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It had been 2 days since Margaret Carter's bombshell revelation at Sunday dinner, and she still felt like her world had been turned completely upside down. 1 month of real dating. The words echoed in her mind as she fumbled with her makeup. What did that even mean? How were they supposed to go from a carefully orchestrated fake engagement to whatever this was supposed to be? Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Good morning, beautiful. Ready for our first official real date tonight? I have something special planned. Lila stared at the message, her heart doing that annoying flutter thing it had been doing every time she thought about him. This was ridiculous. She was a grown woman, not a teenager with her first crush. But there was something about Ethan Carter that made her feel like she was 16 again, nervous and excited and terrified all at once. She typed back, ready as I'll ever be. What should I wear? His response came immediately. Something comfortable. We're not going anywhere fancy. Trust me. Trust him. Right. Lila was beginning to think that might be the most dangerous thing she could do. She chose dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, and ankle boots, casual but put together. The engagement ring caught the light as she grabbed her purse, and she paused for a moment, staring at it. Such a beautiful symbol of something that wasn't real. Or was it? Margaret's words from Sunday dinner haunted her. Are you faking that it's fake? Lila had spent the last 2 days analyzing every interaction she'd had with Ethan, trying to figure out what was performance and what might be genuine. The problem was, the lines had become so blurred she couldn't tell the difference anymore. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock on her apartment door. Lila opened it to find Ethan standing in the hallway, looking devastatingly handsome in jeans and a dark blue Henley that brought out his eyes. He was holding a single yellow daisy, not an expensive bouquet, just one simple flower. "For you," he said, offering the daisy with a slightly nervous smile that made her heart skip. "It's beautiful," Lila said, accepting the flower, "but why a daisy?" Ethan's smile turned genuine and a little bashful. "When I was a kid, my grandmother, my other grandmother, on my mother's side used to tell me that daisies meant new beginnings. I thought it seemed appropriate." Lila felt something warm unfurl in her chest. This small, thoughtful gesture felt more romantic than all the expensive gifts she'd ever received. "Thank you," she said softly. "Let me just put this in water." She found a small glass in her kitchen and filled it with water, placing the daisy carefully inside. When she turned around, Ethan was standing in her tiny living space, looking around with genuine curiosity rather than the judgment she'd been expecting. "I like it," he said, examining the gallery wall of her design work. "It's very you." "You mean small and slightly chaotic?" Lila asked dryly. "I mean warm and creative and real," Ethan corrected, his eyes meeting hers. "It feels like a home, not a showplace." Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thanks. Though, I have to warn you, the whole place could probably fit in your bathroom." Ethan laughed, a genuine sound that made her stomach flutter. "Size isn't everything. This place has character. Speaking of which," Lila said, grabbing her jacket, "where exactly are we going? You were very mysterious in your text." "Well," Ethan said, offering her his arm as they headed for the door, "I thought about taking you to some 5-star restaurant, but then I realized that's what Ethan Carter, the billionaire, would do. Tonight, I just want to be Ethan, and I want to get to know Lila, not Lila Martinez, the fake fiancée." Lila felt her breath catch. "So, who is Ethan when he's not being a billionaire?" Ethan's smile was soft and a little vulnerable. "I guess we're both about to find out." They took the subway, the actual subway, not a car service to Brooklyn. Lila was amazed that Ethan not only knew how to use public transportation, but seemed completely comfortable with it. He helped an elderly woman with her grocery bags, gave up his seat to a tired-looking nurse, and made easy conversation with a group of teenagers who recognized him from business magazines. "You're good at this," Lila observed as they emerged from the subway station in Park Slope. "At what?" "Being normal. I thought billionaires were allergic to public transportation." Ethan grinned. "I wasn't always a billionaire. My dad made me work regular jobs every summer when I was a teenager. Busboy, retail clerk, camp counselor. He said he didn't want me growing up thinking money grew on trees." "Smart man," Lila said, and was surprised to see Ethan's expression darken slightly. "He was," Ethan said quietly. "I wish he could have met you. He would have liked you." The past tense didn't escape Lila's notice, but something in Ethan's tone told her not to push. Instead, she squeezed his arm gently, offering silent support. They walked for several blocks, talking easily about everything and nothing. Ethan asked about her childhood, her dreams, her favorite books and movies. Lila found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years, about helping in her parents' restaurant, about the art teacher who first encouraged her to pursue design, about her dream of one day opening her own creative agency. "What about you?" Lila asked as they paused at a crosswalk. "What did you want to be when you grew up, before you knew you'd inherit a business empire?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. "A teacher, actually, high school art. I was pretty good at drawing when I was younger." Lila stared at him in surprise. "Really? I never would have guessed." "Most people wouldn't," Ethan said with a rueful smile. "It's not exactly the career path the Carter family had in mind for their heir. Do you still draw?" Ethan shook his head. "Not for years. No time." Lila felt a pang of sadness for the dreams he'd given up. "That's a shame. Art is important. It feeds the soul." "Spoken like a true artist," Ethan said, but his tone was affectionate rather than mocking. They stopped in front of a small, cozy restaurant with a hand-painted sign that read, "Mama Rosa's Kitchen." The windows were steamed with warmth, and Lila could smell garlic and herbs wafting from inside. "This is it," Ethan announced. Lila looked at the modest facade in confusion. This is where you're taking me? It looks like the kind of place my parents would choose. Exactly, Ethan said, opening the door for her. I wanted to take you somewhere that felt like family. Not like a business meeting. The interior of Mama Rosa's kitchen was exactly what Lila had expected. Checkered tablecloths, wine bottles repurposed as candle holders, and the warm chaos of a busy family restaurant. An elderly Italian woman with flour on her apron approached them with a beaming smile. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, pulling him into a hug that left white handprints on his dark shirt. "Where have you been? I haven't seen you in months." "Hi, Mama Rosa," Ethan said, hugging her back with obvious affection. "I've been busy, but I wanted to bring someone special to meet you." Mama Rosa turned her attention to Lila, studying her with sharp but kind eyes. "Ah, this must be the girl who's stolen our Ethan's heart. I can see why. You're beautiful, but more importantly, you have kind eyes." Lila felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you. That's very sweet." Come, Mama Rosa said, leading them to a corner table. "I'll make you my special lasagna." "Ethan, you still like extra cheese?" "Yes, you know I do." Ethan grinned, and Lila was struck by how different he looked here. Relaxed, genuine, almost boyish. As Mama Rosa bustled away, Lila leaned across the table. "Let me guess. You come here when you want to escape being Ethan Carter, the billionaire." "Something like that," Ethan admitted. "I discovered this place about 5 years ago when I was having a particularly bad day. Mama Rosa took one look at me and decided I needed feeding and mothering. I've been coming here ever since. And she doesn't care about your money." Ethan laughed. "She tried to pay for my meal the first 3 times I came here, said I looked too skinny and sad to pay for food." Lila felt her heart squeeze. This glimpse of Ethan's private world, the places he went to feel human, was incredibly intimate. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For bringing me here, for sharing this with me." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing over her knuckles. "Lila, I need to tell you something." The serious tone in his voice made Lila's stomach clench. "Okay, this whole thing, the fake engagement, the contract, all of it. It started as a business arrangement, a way for both of us to get something we needed." Lila nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "But somewhere along the way," Ethan continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "it stopped feeling like pretending. And I don't think it's just me." Lila's heart was pounding so hard, she was sure he could hear it. "Ethan, I know this is complicated," he said quickly. "I know we agreed this was just temporary, just for show. But I can't pretend anymore that what I'm feeling isn't real." Before Lila could respond, Mama Rosa appeared with 2 steaming plates of the most incredible-looking lasagna she'd ever seen. "Eat, eat," Mama Rosa commanded. "Food is getting cold, and love is best discussed on full stomachs." Lila caught the knowing twinkle in the older woman's eyes and realized they hadn't been as subtle as they'd thought. The lasagna was incredible. Layers of pasta, meat, cheese, and sauce that tasted like it had been simmering for hours. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, but Lila could feel the weight of Ethan's confession hanging between them. "Ethan," she said, finally setting down her fork. "What you said." "I know it's not fair," Ethan interrupted. "I know I'm changing the rules in the middle of the game, but I had to be honest with you." Lila took a deep breath. "What if I said the feeling was mutual?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Is it?" Lila felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump without knowing if there was water below. "I think, yes, maybe. I don't know." She laughed shakily. "This is so messed up. We barely know each other. 3 weeks ago, I'd never heard of you. And now—" "Now?" Ethan prompted gently. "Now, I find myself checking my phone constantly to see if you've texted. I think about you when I should be working. I get excited about seeing you, even when I know it's just for show." Lila shook her head. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Ethan's smile was soft and a little amazed. "No, it wasn't. But maybe the best things in life are the ones we don't plan for. Your grandmother is going to be insufferably smug when she finds out she was right," Lila said, trying to lighten the mood. "Let her be smug," Ethan said, reaching for her hand again. "She'll have earned it." They finished dinner while talking about lighter things. Favorite movies, childhood embarrassments, travel dreams. But underneath the casual conversation, Lila could feel something fundamental shifting between them. The pretense was gone, replaced by something real and tentative and terrifying. After dinner, Ethan insisted on paying despite Mama Rosa's protests, and the older woman hugged them both goodbye. "You bring her back soon," she told Ethan. "Seriously, This one is special. Don't let her get away." "I won't," Ethan promised, and the sincerity in his voice made Lila's heart skip. They walked slowly back toward the subway, neither seeming eager for the evening to end. "Can I ask you something?" Lila said as they paused at a red light. "Anything. When you were willing to give up your inheritance at dinner Sunday night, was that part of the act?" Ethan was quiet for so long that Lila thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and honest. "I told myself it was," he said. "I told myself I was just playing a part, doing what the character would do. But in that moment, seeing my family treat you like you weren't good enough, Lila, I would have signed those papers. Contract or no contract. Fake engagement or not, I couldn't stand the thought of them hurting you." Lila stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Ethan, I know it's crazy," he said quickly. "I know we've only known each other for a week, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. You make me want to be a better man." Lila felt tears prick at her eyes. "You're already a good man. You just needed someone to see it." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. "Lila Martinez, you are extraordinary." "I'm really not," she whispered. "You are to me." He leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. This kiss was different from the one at the gala that had been for show, a performance for an audience. This was just for them, honest and real and perfect. When they broke apart, Lila felt breathless and dizzy, and more alive than she'd felt in years. "So, where does this leave us?" she asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, "but I'd like to find out, one real day at a time." Lila smiled, feeling hopeful and terrified in equal measure. One day at a time sounds perfect. They rode the subway back to Lila's neighborhood in comfortable silence, her hand in his, both lost in their own thoughts. When they reached her building, Ethan walked her to her door like a proper gentleman. "Thank you for tonight," Lila said, fishing for her keys. "It was perfect. Even though I completely derailed our fake engagement with my inconvenient real feelings," Ethan asked with a self-deprecating smile. "Especially because of that," Lila said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Lila." Lila watched from her window as Ethan walked back toward the main street, probably to catch a cab back to his penthouse. As she got ready for bed, she found herself smiling for no reason at all. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for giving this a chance." "Sweet dreams," Lila typed back. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. Sleep well." As she drifted off to sleep, Lila couldn't help but think that Margaret Carter was going to be absolutely impossible to live with once she found out she'd been right about everything. But for the first time in a long time, Lila didn't care about complications or consequences. She was falling for Ethan Carter, the real Ethan, not the billionaire persona. And maybe, just maybe, he was falling for her too. The next morning, Lila woke up to find a package outside her apartment door. Inside was a small sketchbook and a set of high-quality drawing pencils, along with a note in Ethan's handwriting. "Lila, you said art feeds the soul. Maybe it's time I started feeding mine again. Thank you for reminding me who I used to be." Lila pressed the note to her chest and smiled. This was definitely not going to be a simple fake engagement anymore, but maybe that was exactly what they both needed. 3 days later, Lila was at her computer working on a logo design when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Margaret Carter's name, and Lila's stomach immediately dropped. "Hello, Mrs. Carter," Lila answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hello, dear." Margaret's voice was warm and amused. "I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I got your number from Ethan." "Of course not. What can I do for you?" "Well, I wanted to invite you to lunch tomorrow. Just the two of us. I thought it might be nice to get to know each other better, woman to woman." Lila felt a chill of apprehension. "That sounds lovely. Wonderful. Do you know Le Bernardin? Say 1 o'clock." Lila swallowed hard. Le Bernardin was one of the most expensive restaurants in New York. "I'll be there." "Perfect. Oh, and Lila." Margaret's voice was rich with satisfaction. "Wear something nice. We have a lot to discuss." The line went dead, and Lila stared at her phone in growing dread. Whatever Margaret Carter wanted to discuss, Lila had a feeling it was going to change everything again. Lila spent the entire morning before her lunch with Margaret Carter trying on different outfits and practicing conversation topics in her bathroom mirror. By the time she settled on a navy blue blazer, white silk blouse, and her one pair of designer jeans, a splurge from 2 years ago that she'd worn exactly 3 times, she was a nervous wreck. Le Bernardin was everything Lila had expected, and more, all elegant lighting, pristine white tablecloths, and servers who moved with the precision of ballet dancers. The hostess led her to a corner table where Margaret was already seated, looking regal in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Lila's monthly rent. "Lila, darling." Margaret rose gracefully to greet her with air kisses. "You look lovely. That color suits you." "Thank you," Lila managed, taking her seat and trying not to gawk at the menu prices. The cheapest entree was $68. "I took the liberty of ordering wine," Margaret said, gesturing to an already opened bottle that Lila was sure cost more than her last grocery bill. "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," Lila said, though she made a mental note to sip very slowly. She needed all her wits about her for whatever this conversation was going to bring. Margaret poured wine into both their glasses with practiced ease. "So, tell me, how are things progressing with my grandson?" Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. "They're good, really good. Actually, I can see that." Margaret's smile was knowing. "You're glowing, dear. It's quite becoming." "Mrs. Carter, please, call me Margaret. We're practically family now." The word family sent a little thrill through Lila, even though she knew she shouldn't get too attached to the idea. "Margaret," Lila tried again, "I want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. The real feelings, I mean. It wasn't part of the plan." Margaret's laugh was genuinely amused. "Oh, my dear girl, do you think I didn't know exactly what I was doing when I made that little wager?" Lila blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The 1-month challenge," Margaret clarified, taking a delicate sip of wine. "Did you really think that was spontaneous? I've been watching Ethan for years, waiting for him to find someone who would challenge him, change him, make him remember who he really is underneath all that Carter family armor." Lila stared at her in confusion. "But you seemed so against me at first." "I had to be sure," Margaret said simply. "I had to know if you were strong enough to stand up to our family, smart enough to see through Ethan's defenses, and genuine enough to love him for who he is, not what he has." Lila felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "You were testing me." "I was testing both of you," Margaret corrected, "and I must say, you both passed with flying colors." The server appeared to take their orders, and Lila barely managed to focus enough to choose something that wouldn't completely drain her bank account if Margaret expected her to pay. Margaret ordered for both of them with easy authority, clearly a regular at this establishment. "I don't understand," Lila said once they were alone again. "If you approve of me, why all the drama, the hostile family dinner, the intimidation tactics?" Margaret's expression grew more serious. "Because I needed to see how you would handle the pressure. Being part of this family isn't easy. Lila, there will always be people like Sophia, people who think you don't belong, people who will try to tear you down because of where you come from." Lila felt a familiar stab of insecurity. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong." "Nonsense." Margaret's voice was sharp. "Do you know what I was before I married Ethan's grandfather?" Lila shook her head. "A seamstress," Margaret said with quiet pride. "I worked in a factory in Brooklyn, lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and had exactly $12 to my name when I met Henry Carter at a USO dance in 1955. Lila's mouth fell open. "You're kidding." "I most certainly am not." Margaret's smile was soft with memory. His family was horrified. "A factory worker? Absolutely unacceptable. They tried everything to break us up. Bribes, threats, social ostracism. They told me I was ruining his life, that I was a gold digger who would never be good enough for their precious son." "What did you do?" "I proved them wrong," Margaret said simply. "I learned their rules, mastered their games, and showed them that class isn't about money or bloodlines. It's about character. It took years, but eventually they accepted me. More than that, they came to respect me." Lila felt tears prick at her eyes. "I had no idea." "Very few people do," Margaret said. "We don't advertise our humble beginnings in this family. But Lila, I see so much of myself in you. The determination, the dignity, the refusal to be intimidated by people who think they're better than you." "I'm scared," Lila admitted quietly. "This world, this life, it's so far from anything I've ever known." "Of course you're scared." Margaret reached across the table and squeezed Lila's hand. "But you're not alone. You have Ethan, and you have me. And I promise you, dear, that's more than enough." Their appetizers arrived, some kind of delicate fish preparation that was artfully arranged and probably contained ingredients Lila couldn't pronounce. She took a tentative bite and was surprised by how good it was. "Now," Margaret said, cutting into her own appetizer with surgical precision, "let's talk about why I really asked you here." Lila's stomach clenched. Here it comes, she thought. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope, placing it on the table between them. Lila recognized the Carter Industries letterhead and felt her heart sink. "What is that?" Lila asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "A contract," Margaret said calmly, "but not the kind you're thinking." With trembling fingers, Lila opened the envelope and began to read. It wasn't a payoff or a non-disclosure agreement. It was a job offer. Senior Creative Director at Carter Industries, with a salary that made her current income look like pocket change. "I don't understand," Lila said, looking up at Margaret in confusion. "Ethan mentioned you were looking to expand your business," Margaret explained. "Carter Industries has been needing to update its entire brand identity for years. Who better to head that project than someone with fresh eyes and genuine talent?" Lila stared at the contract, her mind reeling. This is an incredible opportunity." "Yes, it is," Margaret agreed. "But it's also a test." "What kind of test?" Margaret's eyes grew sharp and calculating. "The salary alone would make you financially independent. You'd never have to worry about money again. Never have to depend on anyone else. You could take this job and walk away from Ethan with your head held high, knowing you'd earned your place in this world on your own merits." Lila felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "You're asking me to choose between the job and Ethan. I'm asking you to prove that you're not with my grandson for his money," Margaret said bluntly. "Because if you are, this contract gives you a way out with your dignity intact." Lila stared at the papers in her hands, feeling like she was in some kind of nightmare. "And if I turn down the job, then I'll know your feelings for Ethan are genuine," Margaret said. "But you'll also be giving up the chance for true independence. The opportunity to build something that's entirely your own." Lila's hands were shaking as she set the contract down. "This is impossible. You're asking me to choose between my career dreams and the man I love." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and Margaret's smile was triumphant. "So, you do love him?" Lila felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Yes, I love him. I didn't mean to. I didn't plan to. But I do. And now you're asking me to prove it by giving up everything I've worked for." "Not everything," Margaret said gently. "Just this particular opportunity. Lila, there will be other jobs, other chances to build your career. But true love, that's rare, precious, worth fighting for." "Easy for you to say," Lila said, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "You already won your battle. You got the man and the respect and the empire. What if I choose Ethan and it doesn't work out? What if we break up in 6 months and I've given up the chance of a lifetime for nothing?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment, studying Lila's face with those sharp blue eyes. "Can I tell you a secret?" Margaret said finally. Lila nodded, not trusting her voice. "When I married Henry, his mother made me the same choice. She offered me a substantial sum of money to disappear, or a job at one of their companies. A good job, with excellent pay and real responsibility. All I had to do was walk away from her son. What did you choose?" Margaret's smile was soft and full of memory. "I chose love. And do you know what happened?" Lila shook her head. 6 months later, she offered me an even better job because by then she'd seen how happy I made her son, how much stronger he was with me by his side. Love didn't end my ambitions, Lila. It enhanced them. It gave me the confidence to dream bigger, reach higher, become more than I ever thought possible." Their entree arrived. Interrupting the conversation, Lila mechanically took a few bites of what was probably an exquisite dish, but she could barely taste anything. "What you're not understanding," Margaret continued, "is that this isn't really about the job. It's about trust. Do you trust Ethan enough to believe that he would support your dreams, help you build your career, celebrate your successes? Do you trust yourself enough to know that you can succeed with love in your life, not just despite it?" Lila thought about Ethan's face when he talked about her work, the pride in his voice when he mentioned her projects to his family, the way he'd looked at her design portfolio with genuine admiration. "He believes in me," Lila said quietly. "Yes, he does," Margaret confirmed. "More than that, he sees your potential even when you don't. Ethan told me about your dreams of opening your own creative agency. Did you know he's already been researching commercial real estate in neighborhoods you mentioned liking?" Lila's breath caught. "He has? He's also been quietly networking on your behalf, introducing your name to contacts who could help you grow your business. He's not trying to take care of you, Lila. He's trying to help you soar." Lila felt fresh tears threatening. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand what real partnership looks like," Margaret said. "It's not about choosing between love and ambition. It's about finding someone who makes both possible." Lila stared down at the contract, her mind spinning. So, what happens if I turn this down? Do I pass your test? Margaret's laugh was genuinely amused. Oh, honey, you passed the test the moment you told Sophia Langley that you were a nobody who's engaged to the man she couldn't keep. That's when I knew you had the backbone to be part of this family. Then why? Because you needed to know you had options. Margaret said simply, I don't want you staying with Ethan because you think he's your only chance at security. I want you choosing him because he's your heart's choice. Job or no job. Money or no money. Lila felt like a weight was lifting off her shoulders. And the job? Margaret's smile was mischievous. Oh, the job is real. Carter Industries really does need a creative director, and you really are the best candidate I've found. But Lila, yes? I was never going to let you walk away. One way or another, you're going to be part of this family. The only question was whether you'd fight for your place or let yourself be bought off. Lila started laughing first, a giggle, then a full-belly laugh that drew stares from other diners. You are absolutely diabolical. I prefer strategically minded, Margaret said with dignity, though her eyes were twinkling. So, what's your decision about the job? Lila looked at the contract again, this time seeing it not as a test, but as an opportunity. I'd like to negotiate some terms. I want to keep my own clients and work on Carter Industries projects as a consultant rather than an employee. That way, I can build my own agency while contributing to your rebrand. Margaret's smile was proud. Now you're thinking like a Carter. Done. They spent the rest of lunch discussing the details of Lila's new consulting arrangement, and by the time dessert arrived, Lila felt like she was floating. Not only was she not losing Ethan, she was gaining the career opportunity of a lifetime on her own terms. There's one more thing, Margaret said as they finished their coffee. Ethan doesn't know about any of this. The job offer, our conversation today, any of it. You want me to keep it secret? I want you to tell him when you're ready. Margaret corrected. This is your story to share, your triumph to celebrate. But Lila, yes? Don't wait too long. He's been miserable all week, thinking I was going to try to bribe you to leave him. Lila felt a stab of guilt. I should call him. You should, Margaret agreed, signaling for the check. But first, let's go shopping. Shopping? Margaret's smile was bright and a little wicked. You're going to be the face of Carter Industries' creative department. We need to get you some clothes that reflect your new position. My treat. 4 hours later, Lila's tiny apartment was filled with shopping bags from stores she'd only ever walked past, dreaming. Margaret had been ruthless in her efficiency, dragging Lila through boutiques and department stores with the determination of a general planning a military campaign. Remember, Margaret had said as they parted ways, confidence is the best accessory. You belong in this world because you choose to belong, not because anyone gave you permission. Now, sitting surrounded by beautiful clothes and still processing everything that had happened, Lila felt her phone buzz with a text from Ethan. How did lunch go? Should I be worried that my grandmother successfully bribed you to leave me? Lila smiled and typed back. Your grandmother is terrifying and wonderful, and I adore her. Are you free for dinner? I have news. His response was immediate, always free for you. Good news or bad news? The best news, Lila replied. I'll cook. Come hungry. For food or for you? Lila felt heat flood her cheeks even though she was alone in her apartment. Both. She spent the next 2 hours preparing Ethan's favorite meal, well, what she assumed was his favorite based on their conversation at Mama Rosa's kitchen. She made her grandmother's recipe for chicken mole, Spanish rice, and fresh tortillas, filling her tiny apartment with the warm smells of home. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a knock on her door. Lila opened it to find Ethan standing in her hallway with a bouquet of yellow daisies and a nervous expression. More new beginnings? Lila asked, accepting the flowers with a smile. I was hoping so, Ethan said, studying her face carefully. You look different. Happy. Should I be relieved or terrified? Definitely relieved, Lila said, pulling him inside and closing the door. Ethan, I need to tell you about my lunch with your grandmother. Ethan's expression immediately grew wary. What did she do? She offered me a job. Ethan went very still. What kind of job? Lila led him to her tiny kitchen table, which she'd set with her best dishes and the new daisies in the center. Creative director at Carter Industries. Incredibly good salary. Full benefits. Corner office. The works. Ethan's face was carefully blank. And I negotiated a consulting contract instead, Lila said. Watching his expression carefully, I'm going to help rebrand Carter Industries while building my own agency. Best of both worlds. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Lila felt her stomach clench. Are you upset? Upset? Ethan's voice was strange. Lila, are you telling me that my grandmother offered you your dream job and you took it? Well, yes, but Ethan let out a whoop of joy and spun her around her tiny kitchen, both of them laughing as he set her down and kissed her thoroughly. This is incredible, he said against her lips. You're incredible. I'm so proud of you. You're not upset that she went behind your back? Ethan grinned. Are you kidding? My grandmother just handed the woman I love her dream career on a silver platter. I want to send her flowers. Lila felt her heart skip at his casual use of the word love. Ethan, I know we haven't said it yet, he said softly, cupping her face in his hands. But Lila, I love you. I love your strength, your talent, your determination. I love the way you stand up to my family, and the way you make me want to be better. I love that you chose to build something with me instead of just accepting what was handed to you. Lila felt tears spring to her eyes. I love you, too, so much. It scares me. We don't have to be scared, Ethan said, his thumbs brushing away her tears. We can figure this out together. Even though I'm about to become your business partner? Ethan's smile was soft and full of promise. Especially because of that, Lila Martinez, will you be my real fiancée? Not for show, not for family pressure, not for contracts or arrangements, but because we choose each other. Lila felt her heart overflow with happiness. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Ethan kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of love. And Lila thought that this was what happy endings felt like. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and chosen and worth fighting for. Later, as they sat at her tiny table sharing chicken mole and talking about their future, Lila's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. I assume by now you've told Ethan about the job. How did he take it? Lila showed Ethan the message, and he grinned as he typed a response. He's currently planning to send you the biggest bouquet of daisies money can buy. Thank you for seeing what we couldn't see ourselves. Margaret's response came quickly. About time you two figured it out. Family dinner Sunday. I promise to be less terrifying this time. Lila laughed as she typed back. We'll be there. Thank you for everything. Welcome to the family, dear. As Lila looked around her tiny apartment, at the flowers Ethan brought, at the beautiful clothes Margaret had bought her, at the man she loved sitting at her grandmother's table eating food made with her mother's recipes, she realized that finding where you belong wasn't about changing yourself to fit into someone else's world. It was about finding people who loved you enough to help you build a world where you could be everything you were meant to be. And as Ethan reached across the table to take her hand, his thumb tracing over the engagement ring that was now a symbol of something beautifully, wonderfully real, Lila knew she had found exactly that. The fake engagement was over. The real love story was just beginning. 6 months later, Lila stood in the conference room at Carter Industries, looking out at the team of designers and marketing executives who were applauding her presentation. The rebrand had been a massive success, and Martinez Creative Agency now had a waiting list of clients who wanted to work with the woman who had transformed one of New York's most traditional companies into a modern, innovative brand. Excellent work, said the Thompson Group's CEO, shaking Lila's hand enthusiastically. We'd love to discuss having you redesign our entire corporate identity. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Lila gathered her materials with a sense of satisfaction she'd never experienced before. She'd done this, built something amazing with her own talent and hard work. That was incredible, Ethan said from the doorway, where he'd been watching the presentation with obvious pride. You were incredible. We were incredible, Lila corrected, walking over to him. This rebrand worked because we collaborated, because you trusted my vision, and I respected your business sense. Ethan pulled her into his arms, not caring who might see. Have I mentioned lately that I love working with my fiancé? Only about a dozen times today, Lila laughed, though I never get tired of hearing it. Good, Ethan said, kissing her softly, because I plan to keep saying it for the next 50 years or so. Lila's heart fluttered the way it always did when he talked about their future. Only 50? Well, Ethan grinned, we should probably see how the first 50 go before we commit to more. As they walked out of the Carter Industries building together, Lila caught sight of Sophia Langley across the street, talking animatedly with a man who looked bored and was checking his phone while she spoke. Sophia glanced over and saw Lila and Ethan, her face twisting with the same bitter expression she'd worn at the gala 6 months ago. Some people never change, Ethan observed, following her gaze. Some people do, Lila said, thinking of Margaret, of herself, of the man beside her who'd rediscovered his love of art and was now taking evening classes at a local studio. Ready to go home and plan our wedding? Ethan asked, offering her his arm. Lila smiled, thinking of the house they'd bought together in Brooklyn, big enough for her art studio and his home office, close enough to her parents' restaurant for weekly dinners, far enough from Manhattan to feel like a retreat. Ready, she said, taking his arm and feeling for the first time in her life, like everything was exactly as it should be. As they walked down the street together, Lila couldn't help but smile at the memory of how this had all started, with a humiliation, a desperate proposal, and a fake engagement that had turned into the most real thing in her life. Sometimes, the best love stories were the ones you never saw coming.